People say your ancestors are a gateway to understanding your bloodline. I never really knew mine. Not until now. Recently, I was digging in my backyard, hoping to make room to plant some seeds, when my shovel hit something in the dirt. I continued digging, and I found a small metal box inside. "What the?" I murmured, seizing the box and lifting it out of the ground. I can't exactly explain it, but there were all sorts of these strange symbols all around it, ones I did not recognize. I brought it into the house, and then opened it. It had a small lock on it, but it seemed to break easily, as if the box wanted me to open it. And so, open it I did. The first thing I saw was a piece of paper covering the contents, which seemed to be a bunch of pictures kept together by an old rubber band, facing down, obscured to me. The paper itself was just a bunch of numbers I soon deduced to be coordinates to a small coastal town somewhere across the ocean, in the United Kingdom. Anyway, after opening the box, I set the paper to one side, and then took out the pictures. I flipped them over, and the very first one was a black and white photograph of a cliff overlooking a beach. Trees were on it, and in the distance the sun was setting, or rising. I couldn't exactly tell. Underneath the tree on top of the cliff was a blurry figure, a young girl. I took the photo out and examined it closer. For a second, I was sure I recognized the place. It was some sort of déjà vu, except not really. It was as if this was a memory imprinted into my blood, my very soul. I felt something on the back of the picture, and then I realized it was ink. Somehow wet. It seemed strange at first, but the box did seem damp, and mould was around the edges of the stack of photos. It was honestly a wonder it all survived. Mathilda Maddox, I read. That was all the ink had shown. No date, no location, no other information. Yet still, the name seemed familiar to me, as if that was it. My mother had told me about our family once and only once, when I was but a child. According to her, her mother used to live with a large family in a small village on the outskirts of Wales. Her mother, according to my mother, lived a very odd life there. The villagers, every day at noon, would always go down to the beach, where they would stay for an hour, and then return. Her mother never found out why, as the village was soon bombed, reduced to nothing, erasing the history. I tried searching up this coastal village once, but none of the bombed villages seemed to match the one I'd heard about. But this picture, and a name now, this is important. Mathilda Maddox. That did seem like my family, but how did it connect to the village? One click on an ancestry site later, I learned that my mother, Agatha Wilhelm, had had her last name changed by her mother, and originally, the surname would have been Maddox. I didn't expect that. Not at all. My surname was supposed to be Maddox. That was interesting. I continued, putting the photo to one side, and then going to the next one. It was facing away from me, as if it didn't want to be exposed to the world. I gingerly flipped it, making sure not to damage the wet paper. For a second, I didn't really understand what I was looking at. It was bizarre to say the least, and it was unlike anything I'd ever seen before. It was a statue, a figure sitting down on a rock, except there was one thing wrong with it. Well, two. One, it had no head, and there was a stump where it should have been, and two, it was covered from neck to toe in hair. From the monochrome photo, I saw that it was covered in a blanket of stringy, web-like hair. In my mind, I imagined the hair as brownish, perhaps dull, and insects crawling all over it. I felt a sickening feel in my stomach as I thought of it. The statue just seemed wrong somehow, like it wasn't meant for this world. Beside the statue was a young girl. The same young girl I'd seen earlier. On the back, there was yet another note. Idol of 90YK, I read. That was weird. I flipped the picture back, then looked at the girl. She looked older than before. Perhaps this photo had been taken at a later date. I looked closer, more intently, and I saw something. The girl had a necklace, and it was a necklace I had. A family heirloom, my mother had explained, first owned by her grandmother as a way to ward off evil. It was a seashell that seemed like it was made of a seashell I'd never seen before. I remember it being called an amulet, and soon I had it in my hands, comparing the ancient shell to the photo. With fine and perfect detail, they matched. The next thing I noticed was that the girl was covering her left eye with a hand. Everything else seemed normal, aside from the fact that the photo was taken in a place where there happened to be too much shadows, but I assumed it was objects of camera casting them. I slid it away, deciding to look at the next one. But, just for a second, I could swear that the girl in the photo moved her hand away, but when I checked, everything was as it was before. No, that's not right. The girl's smile was wider, more joyous, but I marked it up to being tired at the time. Mathilda Maddox. Was she my great-grandmother? I was surprised to find that the next piece of paper wasn't a photograph, rather a newspaper clipping, old and aged with time. Local girls vanish on the beach, I read, reading the headline. One later found dead. I read the rest of the small clipping. Apparently, a young girl, Mathilda, had run onto the beach with her sister, Nellie, and vanished, disappearing for 3 days. Then they later found Mathilda shivering inside a cave right in front of the statue, confused. Her sister, Nellie, was never seen again. I looked it up on the news, looking for archives, and sure enough, I found it. It didn't mention the village, to my annoyance, but it confirmed the article's truth. I wasn't able to get any more information out of it. Apparently, a day before the archives were set to digitize the rest of the article, an unexplained fire burnt down the entire building, claiming the lives of 2 more people. I checked the next photograph. Now that one gave me more information I could use. It was a photograph of a richly dressed young girl standing next to the statue, and on the back of the photograph were 2 very important words. My daughter, Marion Crease. Oddly enough, these words were scrawled in a different handwriting than the other messages. Were 2 people involved in this? Even the other photographs, the ones I'll get to soon, had the other handwriting on it. And this one was different. Unique. My daughter, Marion Crease, I read again. Instantly, I typed away at my laptop, and very soon, I confirmed she was indeed real. She was old now, and living in an assisted living facility a city away from me. The photographer's daughter. I made up in my mind to talk to her, so I called the facility. Casden Assisted Living, how can we help? A bored-sounding woman answered. Hi, I'm looking to know more about, Marion Crease, I explained. Does she live there? I heard typing. She lives there. Who are you again? I'm a relative, I lied. It was the closest excuse I had, as well as the only one I could think of. She doesn't appear to have any relatives in the system. Oh, I just found out about her, I explained. At least that wasn't a lie. My name's Etsy Crease. I'm related, I think. Okay, got it. So... Do you want me to set up an appointment or something? Yes, I practically screamed. I'd love to. Okay, got it. I just need your email, and we'll get you your appointment very soon. I told the bored lady my email address, number, and all that stuff, and then hung up. A few minutes later, I received an email, a confirmation of the appointment, which was scheduled 3 days from now. 3 days seemed like an infinity of time. So I turned back to the photos and looked through the next and final one. "My God!" I gasped, seeing the sight. On the back it read, "Nobody can ever know," and the image itself was frightening, to say the least. It was the dead body of a young girl, mangled, as if torn apart by something malicious and cunning, a predator in the midst of a small coastal village. The corpse was on the beach, on the sand, resting peacefully near the mouth of the cave, as if it had just been washed up by the ocean, or spit up by the cave. But that's not the strangest part, because, as far as I could tell, that girl was Nellie, the girl that vanished. A locket around her neck read out her name. But the corpse was wrong, inhuman even, because, even mangled and torn apart, the corpse had not 4 limbs, but 8, as if she were a spider, and further, these were all legs, ending in feet that were cut and bloodied. Her clothes were impossibly intact, and just above them was her face, smiling, hair flowing, and she seemed almost alive. The illusion of her being alive would have worked, save for the missing left eye. The girl had nothing there but a socket, where I swear it pulsed and breathed, even through the ancient photograph. I searched the internet for any information about the body, true to the photographer's words. Nobody ever knew. And finally was the final picture. I noticed the young girl I'd seen in the beginning, the girl I assumed to be my great-grandmother. She was standing tall, proud, happy in the centre, while a row of other people was behind her. They looked like my family, her family, my ancestors. They were dressed similarly, suits or dresses, and they looked happy to be there. The cliff was in the distance, and the sun hung in the sky gorgeously, neither setting nor rising. It was almost a perfect scene, but for the fact that every single one of my ancestors was missing a left eye. "Don't look with your left eye, for it sees evil," I murmured, reading the final message left by the photographer. And that was it. No more photographs, no more messages. For the next 2 days I could think of nothing but the box and meeting Marion Crease to get some answers. And 3 days later, I arrived at the Casden Assisted Living Centre, signed in, and met the bored-sounding woman. "I'm, Etsy," I told. "I'm here to see my great-grandmother." "Just follow me," she sighed. We walked, and she began to speak some more. "I'm just telling you, you won't be able to get much out of her. A month ago, a fire appeared out of nowhere in the cafeteria. She was there, and ever since then, we've been getting barely any response from her." "Got it," I murmured. I looked at my pocket. The photographs were there, and I'd hoped she'd been able to explain them to me. We arrived outdoors, in a garden, and I was led to Marion. She was in a wheelchair, and I knelt down. The bored woman left us, and I faced her. I saw her in full view now, wearing old hospital clothing, wearing a necklace that seemed awfully similar to the amulet, and, most strangely, an eye patch on her left eye. "Marion," I asked. "My name's Etsy. I have some questions." No answer. She rolled her head back and forth, her long grey hair bobbing as she did. She looked across at a lake, where fish swam freely. "Do you know who Nellie is? Or Mathilda Maddox?" I asked. No response. I decided to show her the photographs, and I took them out of my pocket. First, I took out the very first image, the cliff, the tree, and the girl. Marion watched, some ducks, eating bread. I showed her the second one, the statue and the girl, Mathilda. I thought she briefly looked at it, a glance, but then went back at observing the ducks, unresponsive. I showed her the newspaper clipping, but she remained silent. I put it back, then showed the photograph of my ancestors, all missing a left eye. I could swear her eyes mildly dilated, recognizing the photo, but still, she remained silent. I even showed her own photograph, but still, she remained silent. I looked at the final photo, the corpse found, the one with 8 legs, the one of Nellie. Should I be showing such a thing to someone as old as her? But, against my judgment, I did. Instantly, her hand shot out, and I felt a cold, clammy sensation around my wrist. "Hey!" I gasped, confused. She looked at me, and I saw that somehow the eye patch had fallen away, and then spoke to me in a hushed, hollow voice. "Nobody can ever know." She released her grip on my wrist, and I stepped away, panting. I remembered what was on the back of the photograph, those exact same words. "Did you?" I began, gasping for air. "Were you the one who wrote the messages down on all the photographs?" She didn't do anything but move back and forth. Eye patch returned, and her one good eye, watching the ducks. I looked back at the photographs, then back at Marion. What exactly does this all mean? Who exactly were my ancestors? What was that hair-covered statue in the cave? And why was Nellie's corpse that way? I don't have any answers. Not yet, at least. But if anyone knows anything, I need to know. Now.